IELTS Practice. Questions 1 to 10.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandy Raymond, and I'm going to be talking about a remarkable timepiece called the Breitling Emergency Watch. Some of you may remember it as the watch that Richard Branson auctioned off on eBay, raising £20,000 for charity after he'd lent it to Steve Fossett for his non-stop round-the-world flight. Perhaps more significantly, though, it was the kind of watch being worn last year by two British pilots whose helicopter crashed into the sea just off Antarctica. Finding themselves in a lifeboat with no other means of communication, they activated the transmitters inside their watches. The signals were picked up by a Chilean aircraft, which homed in on them and then organised a rescue that saved the men's lives. And these are just the people the watch was designed for. Aviators and aircrew who suddenly find themselves on the ground or in the water after a forced landing. The watch has a built-in microtransmitter which can broadcast a signal for up to 48 hours on 121.5 MHz, the aircraft emergency frequency. It's water-resistant too. Even with the transmitter operating, it can be used at depths of up to 30 metres. The operating range depends to a great extent on whether there are any obstacles between the transmitter and the rescue aircraft. On flat terrain with few trees, for instance, the signal can be picked up at up to 160 kilometres away, and it's the same on water, as long as the seas are calm. While from the top of a mountain, it has a range of up to 400 kilometres. It's not a particularly bulky or heavy item to wear, though. At 16 millimetres thick and measuring 43 in diameter, it's just 85 grams, which is about the normal weight for this kind of wristwatch. So, what makes this watch tick, as it were? The answer to that is two separate mechanisms. One quartz electronic with an LCD digital display, and the other a self-winding mechanical system that turns the hands. This is driven by an oscillating weight that swings in time with the movements of the wrist, thus creating the energy to rewind the watch automatically. I should point out here that this is hardly a new invention, as it dates back to 1770, when the Frenchman Abraham Louis Perrellet first made a watch of this kind. Incidentally, an example of his work is still keeping good time today, over 200 years later. Let's take a look inside an emergency watch. Possibly the first thing you notice at the top is the gold ring, indicating compass points and degrees. This surrounds the crystal, which looks like glass, but is in fact made of a scratch-proof synthetic material. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 as diamond hardness, this scores 9. So, the crystal fits onto a protective case made of titanium, a hard but light anti-magnetic metal that is also used in the manufacture of high-performance aircraft. On the right-hand side of the inner case is the crown, used for setting the time and the date. This rounded knob has a locking device to prevent moisture or dust getting into the watch. The watch itself, with the two independent timing systems I mentioned before, is kept separate from the other components. This means that even if the timekeeping functions are damaged in a crash, the emergency signal can still keep going out. For this reason, there are two batteries, an upper one for the watch, and a transmitter battery below, which fits neatly into the circuit board. All the above are housed in the outer case, which in the case of the version shown is made of gold alloy. On the right of this case, you'll notice a rounded cap, which looks like a winding knob, but isn't. This is the real 007 bit. If you twist the cap anti-clockwise and then pull to its full extent, the cap comes off, and you have a 43-centimetre antenna, which immediately starts transmitting on 121.5 MHz. Incidentally, on the other side of the case, there's a secondary antenna which can also be extended, thereby increasing the range of the transmitter.
You will hear part of a lecture about trumpets. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 10.
The trumpet is quite a remarkable instrument. Take the B-flat type, for instance, the kind of trumpet most people use today. If we stretched one out in a straight line, it would measure nearly 140 centimeters in length. What we see in the diagram, then, is a very long brass tube wrapped around itself in order to save space. To produce its characteristic sound, the musician blows continuously into the small metal cup on the left called the mouthpiece, which is shaped to fit the lips. The air travels along the lead pipe and round the tuning slide, which can be moved in or out to change the instrument's pitch. The air then reaches the feature that distinguishes the trumpet from, for instance, a bugle, the three valves that extend from above the top to below the bottom of the instrument. Each valve can send the airflow one of two ways, either along the main pipe, the shortest route, or else into an extra length of tube, thus lowering the pitch of the sound being played. The musician does this by pressing one of the finger buttons at the top, diverting the air into the first tube if the first is pressed, into the second and shortest by using the second, or into the longest one, the third, by pressing number 3. The air then continues its way round the bend in the lead pipe and along to the end at the widest part of the body, known as the bell, which projects the powerful sound forwards. Incidentally, all this breath forced through the metal of the instrument does of course contain water vapor, and this will start to condense and form droplets after a certain amount of playing. The result is a gurgling sound from the trumpet, so to avoid this, there is a device on the tuning slide called the water key, which when pressed lets the water drip out. The trumpet in one form or another has been around for a long time. The earliest type we have actual proof of was a short, straight instrument used with marching soldiers by the ancient Egyptians' 18th dynasty, which makes it 3,500 years old, although other cultures in China and Peru certainly had something similar very early on. This use of the trumpet in military contexts, as well as at ceremonial occasions, was to continue through the times of the ancient Greeks and Romans, but it wasn't until the 17th century that it became a genuinely popular instrument, at least in the West. At the beginning of the 18th century, it was finally accepted as part of the typical orchestra, and the addition of valves in the 19th century, making it much more versatile, consolidated its position as a major orchestral instrument. Nowadays, the sound of the trumpet, which is of course both loud and clear, means that for many pieces it is used to lead the brass section of the orchestra. This sound and its versatility have helped extend its use to other forms of music such as jazz and pop, but there is another very practical reason for its widespread popularity. In comparison with many others, such as the tuba, the cello, or even the trombone, it is a fairly small instrument that can easily be transported and played just about anywhere. The downside of all this popularity, though, is that as everyone wants to be a trumpeter, it can be difficult for the young musician looking for work to find a vacancy. As a result, it's often the case that quite a few of the French horn players in a modern orchestra actually began their musical careers as trumpet players.